The call came on a Tuesday. I know it was a Tuesday because I had just dropped my son off at his grandmother's, my mom's place on Fielding Street, and I was sitting in the school district parking lot waiting for a parent-teacher meeting that started at 4. I had the radio off. I remember that. Just the sound of the lot, a cart rolling somewhere, someone's keys. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat, and I picked it up without looking. It was my wife. Not a call. A text. I'm already at the airport. I can't do this anymore. I need to live my life. Don't make this into something ugly. Dylan is better off with you anyway. I read it twice. Then I put the phone face down on the seat and sat there for a long time. Dylan was 4 years old. He was at my mom's, eating crackers and watching whatever cartoon had talking dogs that week. He didn't know his mother had just decided she was done. I went into the meeting. I sat across from his teacher, a kind woman named Mrs. Albrecht, and I listened to her talk about how Dylan was making progress with his letters, how he liked to draw boats even though we lived nowhere near water, how he sometimes got quiet during circle time but always came back around. I nodded. I said thank you. I walked out to my truck and drove to my mother's house, and I sat in her kitchen while Dylan ate dinner, and I didn't say a single word about what had happened until he was asleep. Her name was Cassie. We had been married 6 years. I was 31. We met when I was 24, working for a commercial HVAC company out of Columbus. She was managing front of house at a restaurant downtown, the kind of place with exposed brick and small plates and wine lists that took a minute to read. I came in once after a job nearby, and she brought me a menu, and I asked her what the soup was, and she said something that made me laugh, and I stayed for 2 hours. I asked for her number on a napkin because I genuinely couldn't think of a smoother way to do it. We dated for 2 years, moved in together, got married at her aunt's farm in eastern Ohio on a Saturday in October when the leaves were at their peak, and the whole thing cost us less than $6,000 because we paid for most of it ourselves. My dad cried during the vows. Hers didn't come. Dylan was born the following spring. The early years were hard, the way early years with a baby are hard, short on sleep, short on money, long on everything else. I picked up extra jobs on weekends. She went back to restaurant work part-time when Dylan was 18 months. We managed. We weren't perfect, but we were trying, and I think for a while that counted for something. The change came slow. It always does. She started going out more, not in a dramatic way. Nothing I could have pointed at in the moment. Just more evenings out with friends, more weekends where she had something going on, more late nights where she'd come home smelling like a bar and go straight to the shower. I told myself she needed the outlet, that staying home with a toddler was hard, that I worked long hours, and wasn't always present. I found reasons for all of it. Then one night, about 8 months before the text message, I found a name I didn't recognize on her phone. Not hidden, just there in the notification preview as I walked past the counter. A first name, a message that I only caught half of before the screen went dark. I asked her about it. She said it was a coworker, someone from the restaurant. She said it in that even tired way that's designed to make you feel like the crazy one for asking, and I let it go because I wanted to let it go. I wanted the version of our life I still believed in. Looking back now, I think she had already decided. The night of the text, after my mom and I talked quietly in her kitchen for an hour, after she cried and I didn't, I drove home and walked through the house with the lights off. Her closet was half empty, the good half. Her jewelry box had a gap in it where the things that mattered to her used to be. Her toiletries bag was gone from the bathroom. She had been methodical. She had planned this out over days, maybe weeks, and she had waited for a Tuesday afternoon when Dylan was at my mother's and I was across town at a school meeting. I sat on the edge of our bed, my bed, and I called her. She answered on the third ring. I asked where she was. She said Atlanta. I asked who she was with. Long pause. She said a friend. I said the friend's name, the one I'd half seen on her phone 8 months ago. And she didn't deny it. She just said she needed me to be an adult about this. I told her Dylan was going to need both of us to handle this right. She said she knew that. She said she just needed some time. She said she'd call him in the morning. She didn't call him in the morning. She didn't call 3 days later. Dylan held the phone with both hands the way he always did and said, "Mama," and listened and then handed the phone back to me and went back to his Legos. He was 4. He didn't have the language for what he was feeling. He just went quiet. That's the thing I think about the most, still, how quiet he went. She landed in Austin, not Atlanta. She lied about that part. She was living with him in a rental near South Congress, the kind of neighborhood she'd always said she wanted to move to someday. I found this out not because she told me, but because one of her old coworkers felt bad enough to say something. I filed for divorce 3 weeks after she left. I'm not going to pretend I did this calmly. I was angry in a way I hadn't been since I was a teenager. The kind of anger that sits in your chest at 3 in the morning and won't let you sleep. But I had a 4-year-old who was watching me to understand what his life was going to look like now. So I did what I needed to do. I called a lawyer. I documented everything I could think of. I kept every text message, every voicemail, every instance where she didn't call when she said she would. My lawyer, a methodical woman named Patel, who had clearly heard every version of this story, told me to keep a journal. Write down every time Dylan asked for his mom. Every time the phone call didn't come. Every time he had a nightmare or refused to eat or cried in the car for no reason he could name. I kept that journal for 7 months. She hired a lawyer too. Good one, from what I could tell. And somewhere around month 3, her position shifted. She wanted joint custody. She said she was settled now, had a stable home, was ready to be involved. Her lawyer sent a parenting plan proposal that read like it had been written by someone who hadn't missed a single day of that boy's life. I sat with my lawyer and went through it line by line. The first hearing was in February. Cold morning, the kind where the air cuts through your jacket before you've made it to the door. I wore the gray suit I'd bought for a job interview 4 years ago and sat in the hallway outside the courtroom for 40 minutes before my name was called. She was there. She looked good. She had cut her hair shorter, and she was wearing something professional. And she sat next to her lawyer and didn't look at me until she had to. The judge was a man in his early 60s, unhurried. He asked both parties questions. He'd read the filings. When he asked Cassie about her current living situation, she described it as a stable 2-bedroom apartment. He asked if she was employed. She said she was deployed freelance event coordination, which was the first I'd heard of that. He asked how often she had seen Dylan in the past 7 months. Her lawyer tried to reframe the question. The judge didn't let him. She said she had visited Dylan twice. The judge asked how long each visit had been. She said 1 day each time. The judge made a note. When he asked me the same questions, I answered them. I didn't editorialize. My lawyer had coached me not to. I just said what had happened, when, and how. I had dates. I had voicemails. I had the journal with me in a folder, tabbed and numbered, the way Patel had shown me. The judge asked to see the journal. I handed it over. He read for a long time. He didn't rule that day. He said he wanted a guardian ad litem assigned, someone to meet with Dylan independently and report back. He scheduled a second hearing for April. I drove home and picked Dylan up from my mom's and made him grilled cheese, and we watched the cartoon with the talking dogs, and he fell asleep on the couch with his head on my leg, and I sat there in the quiet and I let myself cry for the first time since the parking lot. The guardian ad litem was a soft-spoken man named Marcus, who met with Dylan at a neutral location, a child-friendly office with toys and books, 3 times over 6 weeks. He also interviewed me, my mother, Dylan's preschool teacher, and Cassie. He never told me what Dylan said. That's not how it works. But he filed his report with the court and my lawyer got a copy, and when she called me to go over it, her voice was different. Quieter. She said it was favorable. Cassie called me the week before the second hearing. She said she thought we could avoid going back to court if I'd agree to a modified plan. Equal time split, she'd move back to Columbus, she'd get an apartment nearby. I listened. I asked if she had already found an apartment. She hadn't. I asked if she had employment in Columbus lined up. She didn't. I said I talked to my lawyer. My lawyer said to let the judge decide. The second hearing was in April. Outside the courthouse, the trees were doing that thing they do in early spring where they look almost confused. Bare branches and a few early buds, the season not quite committed to itself yet. I sat on a bench for 10 minutes before I went in, and I thought about the day Dylan was born. The specific weight of him when the nurse put him in my arms, how I had not known until that moment what it meant to be responsible for something. The judge had read the guardian's report. He had our filings. He looked tired in the way judges look when they've seen this particular situation too many times. He awarded me primary physical custody. She would have parenting time every other weekend, alternating holidays, and 2 weeks in the summer. She would need to establish stable employment and housing in Franklin County before any expansion of that schedule would be considered. Her lawyer asked about a modification path. The judge said it was available to her once she met those benchmarks. He said it clearly and without drama, the way you say something that is simply the conclusion the facts led you to. I don't remember walking out of the courthouse. I remember the bench outside, sitting down on it again, and calling my mom. She picked up on the first ring. I didn't say anything for a few seconds and she said, "Ethan," then stopped and corrected herself. Actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. She said my name, my actual name, and I said, "We're okay," and that was all either of us needed. She contested it. Of course she did. Her lawyer filed a motion for reconsideration 6 weeks later. They argued that the judge had weighted the guardian's report too heavily, that the standard for primary custody had not been clearly met, that she had since secured a lease on an apartment in Columbus and had interviews lined up. We went back. The judge reviewed the new information. He acknowledged the apartment. He acknowledged the employment efforts. He said the existing order would stand pending her establishing 6 months of stable employment and consistent parenting time under the current schedule. She had the apartment. She didn't have the job yet. That summer, she made 4 of her 6 scheduled weekends. She missed 2, once for a trip, once for a reason her lawyer characterized as a scheduling conflict. I logged both. I didn't say anything to Dylan except that Mom had something come up and she'd see him next time. He was 5 by then. He accepted this with a steadiness that made me proud and broke my heart at the same time. I want to say something here about money because people always have questions about it, and I think the honest version of the story requires it. I started over with my truck, my tools, my half of a savings account that had less in it than I'd thought, because she had made some withdrawals in the weeks before she left. Not emptied, nothing dramatic, but enough that I noticed. I had my job. I had my mom 10 minutes away. I had a lease on a 2-bedroom apartment that I had signed the month after she moved out. A place with a second room I painted blue because Dylan said blue was his best color. We were tight. There were months where I was moving money around on Thursday to make things work on Friday. I took on a weekend job for 4 months doing warehouse logistics, waking up at 5 on Saturdays and driving 40 minutes each way. I didn't love it. But Dylan had what he needed. He had new shoes when he outgrew the old ones. He had birthday parties. He had the cartoon with the talking dogs and the blue room and his grandmother down the street. The modification request came through in March of the following year. Cassie had held her job, a venue coordination role at an event space downtown, for 9 months. She had been consistent on her parenting weekends for the past 6. Her lawyer filed a motion requesting expanded time. My lawyer called me the night before the hearing. She said it would likely go through. She said that was actually the right outcome, that a child needs both parents when both parents are stable, and that I should go into the hearing ready to agree on something reasonable rather than fight. I thought about that for a long time. I called Cassie directly that night. We hadn't done that in months. Everything had gone through the lawyers. She picked up on the second ring, and I said I'd been thinking, and I thought we should try to agree to something before we walked into the room. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said okay. We worked it out over 2 phone calls. Week on, week off during the school year. Alternating holidays. Summer split evenly. Both of us living within 15 miles of Dylan's school. If either of us needed to move, 60 days notice and mutual discussion. We told our lawyers in the morning. The lawyers told the judge. The judge approved it. That was 8 months ago. Dylan is 6 now. He starts first grade in the fall. He still draws boats, more detailed now, with cabins and little windows and people on the decks. He has 2 rooms, 1 at each house, and he moves between them with a backpack and a very specific stuffed animal whose name changes every few weeks and who I am never allowed to question. I'm not going to tell you it's easy. It's not. There are Sundays when I drop him off and the drive home feels very long. There are Tuesday nights when the apartment is too quiet and I have to find something to do with my hands. But here's what I know. The morning after the second hearing, the one where the judge kept primary custody with me, I picked Dylan up from my mom's and we drove to a diner we liked on Morrison, and I let him order pancakes with chocolate chips even though it was 10 in the morning, and I watched him pour too much syrup and eat with complete focus the way he always did, and I thought, this is what I did it for. Not the verdict, not the custody schedule, not anything a judge put on paper, just this, him, with syrup on his chin, telling me about the boat he was going to draw later, naming all the people who would be on it, giving them jobs, worrying seriously about whether the captain had enough room in the cabin. I'm the captain of a much smaller vessel, but I know where I'm going, and he's always on board. I've thought a lot about what actually happened here. Not the legal part. The human part. Cassie didn't leave because she stopped loving Dylan. I don't think that's true, and I never did. She left because she had spent years making choices based on what she wanted in the next 5 minutes. And at some point, those choices added up into a life she didn't recognize and a version of herself she didn't want to sit with anymore. So she ran. That's the honest read on it. Not malice. Just someone who had never learned to stay in the hard part long enough for it to turn into something. I'm not saying that to be cruel. I've done my own inventory. There were things I let slide for too long. Conversations I avoided. Signs I filed away under. She'll work through it. Because looking directly at them was uncomfortable. I wasn't a perfect husband. I wasn't always present the way I should have been. I know that, but here's what I've come to understand. Slowly, the way you understand things that come from experience instead of advice, the choices we make when things get hard are the ones that define us. Not the easy days. Not the days when everything is working and Dylan is laughing and the rent is paid and you feel like you've got it figured out. The days that count are the Tuesday nights when the apartment is quiet and you have to decide who you're going to be. I chose to stay, not in the marriage. That was over the moment she sent that text. I chose to stay in the hard work of being Dylan's father, fully, without using my own pain as an excuse to be less present for him. That wasn't noble. It wasn't a heroic decision. It was just the only decision I could live with. He was watching me to understand what the world was. I had to be careful about what I showed him. The 7 months I kept that journal, logging every missed call and every quiet moment when he stared at the door. That wasn't bitterness. It was paying attention. It was the work of someone who understood that you don't get to show up for a child in theory. You show up in the actual days, the ordinary ones, with grilled cheese and blue paint and too much syrup on a Saturday morning. Cassie got there eventually. It took consequences she didn't expect, and a judge who read 7 months of evidence, and a guardian who sat with our son 3 times and came back with a report that told its own story. She had to face what her choices had built, and then she had to decide, the same way I had, who she was going to be from that point forward. She's doing it. Imperfectly, like the rest of us. But she's showing up on her weekends. And Dylan knows her laugh again, and that matters more than anything I feel about the years in between. What I want to say to anyone in the middle of something like this is just, do the next right thing. Not the satisfying thing. Not the thing that makes you feel like you won. The right thing. Document what happened. Show up for your kids. Let the process work. Your integrity in the hard stretch is the thing your children will carry with them long after the custody schedule is irrelevant. Dylan is 6. He draws boats with captains who have enough room in the cabin. I think he's going to be okay. And honestly, most days, so am I.